Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee with Coaches. This is Coach Reese here. We're glad to have you with us today. We have Coach Katie O'Connor and Coach Loretta with us. We're going to be interviewing Coach Katie about her experience, 200s, coaching, being coached, all the good things. So thanks for joining us. Here on the podcast, we like to, spread kindness and community through talking about the sport that we love. And it looks like we have another visitor.
I was gonna say there might be a couple cats making some debut appearances here. They love when I'm on calls. So
where are you calling from? Are you calling from your house?
I am, yeah. I'm in my kitchen, my office. Somehow during COVID, everyone kind of claimed a level, and this was my claimed level.
Fantastic.
So where are you located?
I got our yoga room.
I'm in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm in, for any Chicagoans, I'm in the Bucktown neighborhood, so pretty close to the 606.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just before we got on live, we were talking about how you're itching to get back running again. So maybe we'll kind of talk about where you're at now and then kind of reverse engineer the conversation. So you're recovering from what again, Katie?
Yeah, so about tomorrow will be a month from finishing the Bigfoot 200, which is a point-to-point out in the Cascades in Washington State.
That is amazing. And that sounds like it took quite a lot of dedication and perseverance and a lot of good training insight too. So I'm sure that we can talk through everything pretty well here. But
totally.
So how long have you been coaching with Ornery Mule Racing?
So I've been coaching, gosh, Loretta, what is it?
I don't know. I was thinking maybe 2 years. Has it been?
Yeah, I think I feel like it was kind of right after COVID or during,
Yep.
during the COVID blur.
Right. Yes. I think so too.
So in that time, how many athletes have you coached? How many athletes have you seen hit their goals? Like, what has been your experience working with other people in this space so far?
Yeah, I think what I love about coaching is probably what, you all love about coaching too, is, getting to share this passion for the sport with not just ourselves and, like the more athletes that you're able to serve, you kind of get to talk about the thing we all love even more. And it's, it's like, what's cooler than hitting your own goal, but seeing somebody, travel along their, being part of their journey and seeing them hit their goal. I think what's probably been most exciting is having a few more new 100-milers in my roster, which is really exciting. I'm sure you both agree. Like, I love that distance. It's something so special too about, having that first one, kind of get under your belt. So it's been really cool to kind of be on their journey with them. And yeah, so my one athlete is actually coming up on Hennepin.
Nice.
And then I just had another athlete do hallucination out in Michigan. Yeah. So it's just been really fun to see people, kind of tackle something they never thought possible.
Nice. That was interesting that I happened to be at hallucination at Woodstock, and I took the video of the beginning of the race, and your athlete happened to be in that. I didn't, I'm just a blur of people going by. So I'm glad.
Yeah, I only met her through a friend who actually used to be here and moved out to Denver. And so she introduced us, and we had that conversation, which I'm sure you've all had with your athletes too. Like, well, I'm kind of thinking about a 50 or maybe 100. And I'm just like, well, what's holding you back from the 100? Let that kind of simmer. And then, weeks go by and it's like, I can't stop thinking about the 100. I'm like, okay, well then if you can't stop thinking about it, then you're hooked in. Cause it's like, right. It's a mental game. As long as you're mentally excited about it, then you're going to do it.
Right, for sure. And coaching first-time 100 runners is a lot of fun. You get
totally
a lot of information with them. They learn so much. They just kind of just like soak it all in, for race day, and they're so excited. And getting that finish and first buckle is super exciting.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It makes it kind of like the first marathon feel like not as exciting.
Exactly.
Once you've gone through 4 marathons to get a buckle.
Right.
And I think that's a great sign of an amazing coach is when I can hear your excitement about your athletes' races too. I was actually just talking with somebody else on the phone a couple of days ago, and I was like, I just love that like all of my athletes are doing awesome races that like I get fired up about, because now it's like, like you not only give 110%, but if you're fired up on somebody's race, it's like you're giving 130%. You're doing like the race info, like you're going through the website, like looking at start times, looking at elevation profiles, kind of nerding out on it.
Totally.
I think that's awesome.
It is fun.
Yeah, I get really geeked out in all like the crewing. Oh, sorry. I get geeked out with all like the crewing stuff too. So like this last one, the one that was at hallucination, her whole crew were like 100 virgins, if you will. So, getting to like be on a Zoom call with all of them and talking through, how do you support somebody through 100 miles, the ups and downs, and like, what if they don't want to eat, so it's cool to kind of help the support staff too.
I love that. I do Zooms too with the crew sometimes, especially when they're new crew like that. And that's just so helpful that we can offer that to our athletes, right? So that because their crew is so important on race day. And if you don't know what to expect on 100 day, it's nice to have a little bit of insight, I think. So that's really smart coaching.
It's amazing too when you talk to like new crew members and you're like, you give them like a piece of like information that to us ultra runners is just like, oh, why would you not do that? But to like new crew, they're just like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought about that, such as like, hey, like when the runner, like they're going to come in at points, they might look like death, but have you thought about what you're going to say to like cheer them up? Or have you talked with them about how they want to be like, fostered along? Like, do they want the tough love? Do they want the like, go get them type of love? And they're like, oh, I didn't really think about that.
Totally.
So as a coach, you also have a coach yourself. I mean, can we talk about that experience a little bit? I think, to a lot of us, it's kind of like, wait, coaches have coaches? It sounds preposterous, So like, what's your relationship like with your coach, just being a coach yourself?
Yeah, so it actually started, I was coaching myself. And then in 2020, I wanted to do kettle as my first 100. So I reached out to my current coach, and because she also does nutritional counseling. And I loved the fact that she had hundreds under her belt. She also done a 200. And we just kind of started working together for nutrition because I'd done all the research, and it was like, if you're not going to finish a 100 miler, it's either because, you've gotten injured, which was any trail race, right? Or your nutrition just isn't dialed in. So I thought, okay, well, if I can control that, why would I not, go down that route? So we started working together for probably a couple months, starting in like January, right after I got in. And then within a couple of months, I was just like, I'm banging my head into a wall, like overthinking every decision on like, is this run enough? This is the other cat. Overthinking every run, like, is this enough? Is this too much? And so I finally just asked her, I was like, hey, I promise I'm not going to be one of those people that, like when a doctor sees a doctor and they're like questioning everything. I'm like, you tell me what to do and I will like lead, I will let you lead me blindly. So yeah, it kind of started in 2020 with the training for kettle. And then I was so glad to have her support, because then kettle ended up being do it yourself with COVID and all that. And now it's, now she's led me through, to doing the first 200 too. So I think what's cool is, I think it also helps us kind of understand the relationship that we're in with our athletes a little bit better too. It's also just kind of selfishly nice to not think about my own schedule when you're thinking through your athlete's schedule. So I definitely appreciate why our athletes look to us too. And I think we all probably have to have that same reassurance. Like I know what I would, if I have a question, I know how to answer it, but I need my coach to kind of tell me the answer, myself. Like, should I take a rest day? And I know what I would tell my athlete. Yes, you should take a rest day if this is the things you're thinking about, but it helps to have her be like, yeah, you should take the rest day, or no, you can do the tempo today, so it's nice to have somebody like-minded to bounce things off of too. And it was really important for me to find somebody who had been in the same path, done the same things. Not to say someone can't be an amazing coach if not doing, and she lives in Vancouver and I live in Chicago. So completely different trails that we get to run on. But it's been nice just to have somebody, in your corner that's kind of supporting your goals. That's not, your family who kind of gets forced into it.
I find too that like runners are awesome and that they're so supportive that like, when you're like, hey, yeah, should I go do this like hard run or should I do this tempo? Like I'm feeling pretty burnt, but like most runners are gonna be like, yeah, like go get it, like have fun, like smile, But sometimes you need that one person who's known your arc of like training or your like your trajectory when your next race is to be like, either like, yeah, you should feel pretty burnt right now because this is the biggest training that you're gonna do, but are you injured? Kind of go through and ask those questions. And then, kind of lead you to that answer of like, oh yeah, I should, because sometimes that bias just gets we get wrapped up in it, like
totally.
Like Loretta, you got to check your bias sometimes. I got to check my bias sometimes just as far as like how injuries are affecting us or whatnot, and even too, just our emotional state.
Yeah. But I agree, Katie, like that's the reasons I've had a coach as well, because, well, for one, I'm writing so many other people's training plans that sometimes when it gets to mine, it's like kind of falls off, off importance level. And then here I am, just like, oh, why didn't I write my own plan? And also, you know, again, like just, it's weird how I can answer and I can do great for other people, but for myself, I'm hard on myself. And so I need somebody to, you know, kind of keep me in balance. So I'm not going overboard because it's me, you know, I would never do it to somebody else, but I would to myself.
Right.
So that's nice. And also that learning piece, like, I believe I'm like a lifelong learner, you know, my whole career, I've always spent time, you know, taking classes, furthering my education, and as a coach the same way. And I feel like having coaches has really taught me a lot. Like you said, like the dynamics between being coached versus being the coach, what things that I liked, you know, being coached, what things I didn't like, so that I can kind of adapt that for, you know, athletes too. So it is really, I think, helpful to, even though we're coaches, to be coached.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I really liked talking with Jacob Moss about. He's another coach with our team here. Was that, like, me personally, like, I got another perspective, because like this training, this physiology, like it's as much art as it is science. You know, like the science will give you like parameters with which, like, hey, this is a good idea, but then it's the art and the philosophy and just the way that like different coaches can convey certain principles is different too. So I know, like, for me personally, I have this own conceptualization of like the body endurance and whatnot, and like how to level up different aspects. But then talking with Jacob or talking with anybody else, it's like, oh, these are different perspectives of also what have worked with people people who have succeeded and excelled at different types of events too. So I think just broadening, like you said, Loretta, broadening our learning horizons and the input that is coming in is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love that. And I'm glad you said that, because we have a coaches meeting coming up right next week. And we have such a strong team with all kinds of diverse backgrounds that I love it when we get people to, I think we lost Reese, when we get people to come together.
I'm here.
Okay.
The sun was in my eyes, so I figured I'd pivot.
I was like, he's gone, poof. And yeah, so, you know, I love it when we get together as a team and we can bounce ideas off, because I feel like as a team, we're even stronger. I mean, I'm shooting texts to Reese occasionally, like, hey, you know, getting some insight from somebody else, because it's nice to gain other perspectives to make us better coaches. And I actually just went through a virtual physical therapy consultation this morning with one of my athletes with our PT, Dr. Liesl Elsie. And I'm like, thank you so much for letting me be part of that collaboration, because I learned so much watching you go through this PT consultation. And then we were able to collaborate. I was able to take the information she shared and then put it onto their training plan of my athlete. So now, you know, we're working together to support her, and it's all right there in the plan. So just so much, I think that's the benefit when people coach with us. They're getting like really a team, not just one single coach, because we can work back and forth with each other. So. Yeah.
Perfect. So let's transition. Let's pivot gears into this Bigfoot 200. I'm really excited to talk with you about that. Quite the endeavor. I personally like the idea that 200s are not just 2 100-mile races. So I'm really excited to hear about like your philosophy and training going in, and then just like how the race played out. So maybe we can talk first about like, how did you, like, when you first signed up and you thought to yourself, when you started specifically training for this Bigfoot 200, how did you even start to like plan, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. So kind of funny. I was talking to my coach right around when Bigfoot was happening last year. So like we kettle had finished, you know, recovered. And I was like, okay, what's next? You know, I need to have something on the calendar. And we were kind of tossing around some different hundreds, and nothing was really like clicking, you know, nothing was like, yes, that's the one. And then Bigfoot went off. I was like, I don't know why, but I cannot get Bigfoot out of my head. So for the hell of it, you know, I threw my name in the lottery, and, you know, 3 weeks later, got the email like, congratulations, class of 23. And I was like, oh God. So
what did I just do?
Kind of, yeah. I was like, yeah, exactly. What I just do, like all the money comes out of the account, and they're like, it's happening. And so previously when we had talked about some of the hundreds, my coach was like, let's try to get a mountainous 100 in. And then I think, you know, if you're still kind of noodling the 100 or the 200, you know, 2024 would be a great year for that. And I was like, well, how about 2023? Because I just got in. And she's like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting. She's like, I'm like so pumped. Let's do it. So pretty much a year out, we started, you know, planning the training out. And it was really just months, you know, thankfully through our winter of just aerobic building, like just aerobic, aerobically building a strong base. So like most of my runs for the first few months were just, maybe like 40 to 50-mile weeks, pretty basic, and just aerobic running, just building that base, and then throwing in some tempo, some shorter interval stuff here and there. And then really once I got out of the winter, then it was just like, okay, let's start to build up the weekends. So it's very similar to 100 training, honestly, because that's what I think worried me a little bit, was just how much of a time, how much extra time is this going to be? And it really wasn't that much more time. I mean, so everything kind of felt very 100-ish training, except I did add in some power hiking with my pack like fully loaded. So I ended up probably getting up to 20, 25 pounds in my pack, and just doing a lot of like power walks. And I would just be competitive with myself of like, I'm going to get under, this pace per mile, just to have something to kind of keep your brain going. So I think that was probably one big difference. And the other was, a lot of us do the back-to-backs or sandwich runs on the weekend. Mine started becoming 3 back-to-backs. So not as much volume, maybe it'd be like 18, 18, 12 versus, for maybe 100 training, it'd have been 25, 12 or 25, 15, something like that. So it became a lot of 3 days in a row. And then my peak weeks were 18 milers, 4 days in a row. And then my peak week was 4 marathons in a row. And just based on living in the city, we just kind of planned it out where it was going to be a city run where I wouldn't worry about getting in any vert, and then going up to Kettle, trying to get some decent, good Midwest vert in, and then back to the city and back up to Kettle for the final. And it was really just take as much time as you can, let these marathons take you all day. And I would plan a meal in the middle to try to kind of mimic how you have to eat during the 200. That was the big thing too, is kind of training your gut for the 100, right? Is to, maybe take in some real food, but you're still kind of relying a little bit on the sports nutrition. Whereas the 200, you really have to be able to sit down at an aid station and have a burger and then, keep going. So that week, I would say the 4 marathons back to back, plus a power hike, kind of sandwiching those, really kind of convinced me like, okay, I can do this, or at least helped me believe a little bit more that I can do this. But really from the beginning too, besides just the coaching, I dove into anything I could listen to, very similar to like before my first Kettle. Like I was just like, like all of us were like, this is so exciting. I get to learn something totally new, right? So I just dove into, I listened to every single podcast probably 3 times over. There's not a ton of them on any 200 I could find. Bigfoot, there wasn't as many. Listen to them all. Any YouTube video, like that got me through the winter on the treadmill, was just like watching these people, GoPros, and seeing what the train was like. What did they do? And so I was just kind of a sponge, like anything I could do to learn more about it, I would do. And also I started really upping my strength game. I was pretty good about strength even during the 100 training, but I did more heavy lifting, which I've not really been as focused on. And I think heavy squatting, heavy deadlifting really helped me prepare for, just the vert that we just don't have here. Yeah. So it's kind of exciting to, dip into something new and just be all in on it.
That's awesome.
So Candace Burt, she's the director of the 200s, right? Okay, so I was just checking to make sure that her podcast is still on Spotify, because I don't think it's been updated in a couple years or so. But she's got an awesome podcast too, that if anybody's looking for more information on either her races or other long distance races, to go check that out. And I do think too that she just finished doing like 200 or so, like 50Ks day after day after day after day. I think there was another podcast. I would have to check on it to get like her perspective of that. So I would even think that like tuning into like stage race type of podcasts or reading reports on like stage races or subsequent like efforts like that would be pretty illuminating too.
Yeah, it's interesting how many there's the different kind of backgrounds people have coming into the 200s too. I think the 100 obviously you get some people who are just like, I'm just going to go for 100. I've done a road marathon and I'm just excited. I'm going to jump right in. Whereas I feel like the 200, it's interesting. There was also a lot more through hikers. So I did a lot of reading on some of just the gear that they all use too. So yeah, it's kind of like the backgrounds are all very different. So yeah, like stage races, through hikes, anything that was kind of close enough, I I searched it, found it, listened to it over and over again.
That's great. And I mean, I think, you know, any race that we do, doing that kind of stuff helps us to visualize what it's going to be like when we're in that position, right? And I like to even think about it when I'm out on my training runs, like, okay, how am I going to feel at mile 150 or, you know, whatever. I have not done a 200, but you know, I mean, I like to kind of put myself in that, and then like, how am I going to problem solve myself out of that, I guess. But a lot of the things, so I've coached a couple people to Bigfoot 200 finishes as well, but I have never done a 200 myself. So, you know, I think the training is very similar too, but like you said, I mean, I really focus a lot more on that heavy strength and also single leg strength. I mean, we need single leg strength for running anyway, right? Because we're either on one leg or the other the entire run, right? But now when we're also adding in that vert, we need to really have nice, you know, strong single leg strength. So I think that that's huge. And I the same kind of things, you know, having people practice with a pack, because in those big 200s, there's requirements. What kind of things did you have to have in your pack? Because I know there's a requirement list and it gets heavy.
Yeah, I mean, so I was actually I purposely actually packed my pack as if I was going to race kettle, and I'd never weighed it, and I was curious. So I was like, okay, what does this shake out at? So it was about 5.8 pounds is what I would typically race kettle with, like full, like bladders full, all the things. And then I packed it with all the stuff for Bigfoot, and it ended up being 13 pounds. So it wasn't horrible, but definitely sizable more. So what I carried with me at all times, we had to carry like a bivy, which is essentially kind of like that Mylar blanket you get at the end of a marathon, but it's like a sack in case of an emergency, or if you need to take a trail nap. Those are pretty light. And it just kind of, it almost was like a roll, the size of a roll. And then I had to have a thermal shirt with me, waterproof pants, waterproof jacket, windbreaker. I chose to carry extra socks. We needed to carry gloves, something that could work like a hat. So I just did an extra buff, 500 extra calories. And then I chose to carry like a first aid, like foot care kit that just included some basic like blister stuff. You know, I brought some KT tape pre-cut with me. And then I just choose to run with a bladder. And then I got practiced with wearing the 2 flasks. I normally don't run with the flasks for 100, but you just, you know, it's like helping Nicole for Bigfoot, like there's stretches that are just so long, and there's places to filter water and stuff, but I mean, you still need to carry as much as you can. So yeah, I had the 2 front flasks, and then I carried a water filter too. So like it looks like a little top you'd have for your flask. I think it's Hydro Pack. Yeah, actually now has like a flask that the filter fits in, which was perfect timing. God, I feel like there's probably something else, and there was like a Tetris game of trying to fit everything in there. But those were like the basics of, you know, it's just more like the emergency stuff, which this year was pretty warm throughout. So I think I maybe put my like Houdini on a couple times, and that was really it. Like nothing else was needed because it just stayed pretty hot.
Right.
And I just want to put this into perspective for the listeners too. I'm on Ultra Sign up here, and Katie, you finished in 96 hours, 29 minutes, in 55 seconds. That's over 4 days. So like all of this mandatory equipment is like, it sounds like, oh man, that's a lot of gear. But when you're out there for 4 days, and I do believe that some of those aid stations, like they're more than a marathon apart, right? Like they're somewhere about like 20 to 25 miles.
The farthest was 19, but it could take you 8 hours. Like, so I was rationing water 2 separate points where it was just, there was nothing to filter, and it just takes you that long to, you know, to get, you're kind of like doing the math of like looking at the map. Cause you have to have like the course downloaded on your phone on this app called Gaia. And so you're looking at the map, you're looking at where you are, and you're just thinking, you know, I can kind of tell how much I have in my bladder, and I can look at my flask, and I'm like, this isn't going to last if I keep drinking like I want to drink. So it's just, all those little things were just such a different animal to figure out from like, you know, a kettle, which is so incredibly supported, right? You're just like, oh my gosh, this feels luxurious to have this many aid stations now, you know. It seems like such a different perspective, but yeah, it was cool to have to kind of think through those things almost on the fly. And that way I wasn't prepared for. I was not expecting to have to ration water, but you know, it's kind of like, I think Loretta, you mentioned just kind of the on the fly having to figure something out, you know, like my ankle started bothering me. I didn't realize I'd sprained it like on day 2.5. And I was like, oh, my ankle's bothering me, just thinking it was wear and tear. Okay, well, you know, let me pull out my foot kit and just like do some KT tape magic and see if that helps, you know? So there was a lot of things just that were kind of forced news that I'd never done before. And there was no other way. Like there was a water crossing never done a water crossing. I'm a land animal. I'm scared to death of being in the water. And so, you know, my pacer and I just like slowly made our way through. And so it was a lot of cool like firsts that I would never, you can't practice for here, but you just kind of have to do it because otherwise you're not moving forward, you know?
Right. Wow, so many things. You know, I hear you say. So you like, I coached Nicole, and Nicole and you know, kind of, I think started out a little bit together. So I was tracking you guys feverishly the whole way, and it's interesting watching the pace of 200 versus the 100, and like calculating like, are they going to make it? You know, because it's starting to get a little bit sketchy towards the end. Like, oh, you know, how fast are they going to keep moving? But you know, another big piece of it. So of course, it's that nutrition, that hydration, and making sure you're practicing and your gut can handle food, right? Like you mentioned, and that's a big piece, is making sure you can handle food and whatever might be at an aid station, because you know you're not able to carry, or your crew's not at everything, right? And that's another piece. Like you know, when you're looking at these big events like this, you have a choice if you're gonna run with a pacer, or if you're not gonna run with a pacer. So Katie ran with a pacer. My athlete decided to go solo. You know, so you know, you can do these events either way, right? I mean, obviously it's pretty challenging to go by yourself and be so sleep deprived and out in the middle of nowhere, but it's possible. And I think that I would be amiss if I didn't say that, because my athlete feels very strongly about that. She doesn't want people to feel like you have to have a bunch of people go with you.
Yeah.
To make it happen, you know, so it can go either way, you know. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, because I personally, if I went, I would probably want a pacer, you know, but how did you feel? And I mean, could you imagine going without a pacer? Because I imagine you would get pretty tired and a little disoriented.
Yeah, I think what was cool, what I was looking forward to, just kind of what I gathered from a lot of the people who have talked about their experience at these, is like, I think we all love the 100. I mean, the ultra community is special, right? The 100 community is really special. Everybody wants everybody to finish. The 200 community is like that times, you know, it's like that love times 5 million. It's such a great, I mean, and I obviously only done the one, but everybody is really out there to support each other. So if you were going to be solo, so many people, hey, you know, are you leaving the aid station in 5 minutes? Cool, I'll wait for you. So I'm not sure. Actually, I need to chat with Nicole. We've been just messaging, but I would love to hear her experience too. But so I'm hoping that for her sake too, she probably paired up with some people, especially at night. Most people, if they didn't have a pacer, would choose to go out with somebody else. But yeah, for me, like what I loved about the first 100 experience was that it felt like a team effort. You know, I mean, I think what I love when I hear Courtney talk about all of her races is we finished, we did, you know, and that's how I feel. My crew, I've been very, very blessed with like amazing support and friends who want to hang out and do these things with me. So I have like the same set of people who've really helped me through the hundreds come to the 200. So we all know each other like so well. They know how I flow. I know how they flow. I mean, they're just like, everyone's got their job and they crush it. And I'm lucky that my best friend is like the most amazing pacer on the planet. So she knows how to like really, you know, bring out the best in me. So yeah, so for me, I wouldn't want to do it without a crew, just because that makes the experience for me that much better. Like it was so beautiful out there. There was so many challenges, and I can't imagine having had all this stuff going on in my head and through my eyes and not had people that kind of were there with me for it. Right. So for me, not only just from like my gosh, not feeling like I was by myself. I don't do well alone. Right. I mean, I managed obviously, but I'd rather have company. So I think just from like the perspective of being somewhere so new and so remote, and I've never been out there, it was really comforting to have pacers. The course is actually pretty well marked. I was very worried about getting lost. I get lost anywhere, like literally anywhere. So I only really had to pull out my phone a couple times to double check some spots. So that was really reassuring. They do a great job of that. And then, yeah, just, I don't know. For me, it's the shared experience that I really love. And then at the end, you know, like I probably wouldn't have pushed myself as hard the final, you know, so the final 13 miles of this race is on road. And so it's such a strange difference to be like so hyper focused on your footing and you're, you know, like watching out for trees and this and that, to then being able to just run. And so my friend Jamie was just able to get me to, you know, to start hammering like at the end of this 200, but it felt so good to run and just ground and not have to worry about my footing, that it was actually kind of like It's cool.
Right. I
Yeah,
noticed
for me,
yeah, as I noticed on the tracker at that point, I was surprised how much faster people were running that. I mean, thinking, oh my gosh, they've already ran 190 miles and now they're running even faster to the end. I thought that was really interesting, and it really kind of tells you about what the human body can do, right? I mean, you can push past limits that you probably never dreamed of, that you would ever do 200 miles, and
yeah.
yeah, you can do it. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think the other wild piece that I was kind of nervous about is I am just like a high energy person. So like I got to pace one of my crew people finally this year at Kettle, which was so exciting. And I was like the last leg person. So I was the closer, which is usually my best friend's spot. So I was like all the nerves, like I got to make sure I bring her home. And I could not sleep. Like, been up with her since 4 a.m. on Saturday. I'm not going to jump until probably 4 a.m. on Sunday, and I'm just like wired. So I was super nervous about sleep for myself for this one. Because kind of like I'd mentioned before Kettle, right? Like you do all the research, nutrition. For these 200s, it's like the sleep. People still don't really know what to do. The big thing I heard was like, if you haven't slept by 36 hours in, like it's going to be very challenging. So I was really nervous about sleeping the first night because I was also like super amped. So got to the start, got to meet Nicole in person, which was great. Her husband met my crew. My friend Jamie was there, my daughter Gwen, and then one of my crew chiefs, Julie, were like, dropped me off for school, heading off for the day. And, it wasn't until that night that I saw them, which was just wild to like go a whole, day and not see them. And so I was just very nervous that I was going to be so excited to see my people that I wasn't going to sleep, but tired enough that I was able to sleep. So I think being able to sleep that first night for me, one, obviously I got to sleep and reset. And two, it just helped me like calm myself down that I knew I was going to be able to sleep during this thing, and like that, cause that's just such a wild thing. And then you get up and you're stiff and then you get moving and you're good. So I think that was like something that was I didn't get to practice in training.
Hard to practice.
So
yeah,
so I didn't get to practice any of that, but the sleep actually went smoother than I thought it would. And I mean, I'm a person that loves sleep. Like I knock down 8 hours a night if I can. And it was wild to sleep 6 hours over 4 days and be totally okay.
Oh, nice. So what was your sleep strategy? Was there a certain time of the day, and how long did you sleep?
Yeah. So I talked with my coach and I'm like, I'm not a napper. Even when my kid was a baby, I did not sleep when the baby slept. All the things they tell you I did not do because I was not a napper. I survive on caffeine. And so she's like, well, let's not try to reinvent the wheel here for you. Yeah, exactly. I was like, yeah, I think that's coffee too. So she's like, let's just plan on you sleeping at night. So thankfully, because this race is so remote, your crew is kind of remote along with you the whole way. So there's not like, oh, they're going to the Airbnb while you are running. You are out there. So I rented one of those like RVs that have like the bed in there and the mini kitchen and all that. So that also helped because it was very quiet. So I just chose to sleep at night. So thankfully, most of the time it landed out where there'd be a crew accessible aid station in the PM hours. So yeah, my pacing thankfully just hit where like, I think the first night I got in, maybe 11 o'clock at night, it's pitch black, slept for 90 minutes up, and then went about my day. Then the next day I took 2 hours. The third night was like, the second half of the course is a lot more challenging. So I think I took a 3-hour sleep, maybe 2.5 that third night. And then the final leg, I debated pushing through, but I got in and my crew was like, no, you're going to sleep for 2 hours. So, and I was kind of emotionally drained a little bit from that stretch too. So I was like, okay, let's take 2 hours. You're laying there and your legs are all like throbbing. So even though you're laying there for 2 hours, you maybe get 90 minutes, but it was just such a wild experience to like go to bed and get up. And I don't know if Nicole said the same thing, but I feel like once you got through the first day into the night, it just became it was either day or it was night. Mm-hmm. There was no, oh, it's Saturday. Oh, it's Sunday. Oh, it's day 4 or it's day 2. Like nothing made any sense. It was just like, I'm either moving throughout the day without my lights on or I need my lights at night.
That's amazing. For a split second, it kind of reminded me about how like, first time when 100 milers will talk about like eating, or it's like you get into the aid station, it's like, I don't want to. And then your crew is like, yeah, but you'll leave so much better if you get a little something in, and then you get a little something in, you get a little sodium, and you're like, oh yeah, I do feel pretty good. And it kind of like re-energizes you. I could almost imagine how, like you've been so descriptive at just like telling us how you felt as you woke up and like getting back out then, so And I think, yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing because I've heard different opinions about training. It's like, you know, if you train sleep deprivation, you're going to be losing lack of, you know, you're going to have a lack of sleep, and then you're not going to recover from your runs in life quite as well. So how do you balance that? But it almost seems like, you know, like since, you know, you spent 4 days out there, it's almost like you kind of click into this new rhythm that you just have to go out and experience. And I think that's kind of like, that's interesting because like for a lot of us, we get anxiety over the unknown, you know, like there's this sense of, I don't know if I could do it because I've never experienced it or I've never practiced it in training or this or that. And I think that just calls back to the fact that the biggest skill that we have as ultra runners is adaptability, you know, is problem solving, is getting, you know, having tools with you and then learning how to use them, when to use them, and sometimes refiguring your tools to fit a different purpose.
Right. Good point. And a lot more time out there to problem solve.
Yeah.
So what did the like strategy for movement look and feel like? Because when you're doing your week-to-week runs, you know, or your day-to-day runs, we're running, but then when you're actually getting into the race environment, did you have like a walk run type of idea, or were you like, I'm going to try to like jog the flats and then hike the ups? Like what did that look like in your mind?
Yeah, so I did a lot of just kind of like looking at the just different sections, looking at the elevation, knowing my strong suits. Like I'm not a good downhill runner. I'm not confident. So I knew my strengths were going to be power hiking the ups the best I could, and yeah, running the flats. I also Amy, who I think you coached 2 years ago, right? Yeah, she was another Midwest runner. She had run it in 2022 and was cool and shared with me like her Strava files, and we had talked on the phone just about different sections that were challenging. So I kind of looked at like what I guesstimated my pace per segment would be, kind of compared to what she had done in the past, and then just kind of had a rough idea of like, okay, this section might take me 7 hours. How that all play out, I didn't really know, but yeah, my thought was biggest goal was just get to the finish. You know, you had to finish in, I think 107 hours, 8 o'clock on Tuesday. I'm like, if I come through at 7:59 on Tuesday, it's a win. I don't care. But I also don't want to be out there and not feel like I'm racing either. So my thought was, as long as I'm moving with purpose and efficiency, that's going to be good. So I pretty much the first, not a whole lot of this course is runnable, to be honest with you. I wasn't really sure going, you know, even just from coming from Chicago area to Washington, how that would all play out. But a lot of it is just so technical that you're power hiking a lot of it. I would guess maybe 15% I was able to run. You know, and then obviously that last stretch was all road, so that was a little bit easier, but you're power hiking a ton of it. So yeah, I just was making sure that I was moving as best I could for the section. And, you know, and being at an aid station, I had a checklist for myself, like making sure if I was by myself without my crew, like, did I get through these things? I literally made myself cards and all my drop bags of like, make sure you get through these things. Cause you know, if you leave, like I've blown through an aid station at Kettle one time and was like, oh my God, I didn't grab like a granola bar. Okay, well, I can nibble on something like these. I knew, okay, you're going to be really SOL if you leave here and you've forgotten something in your checklist. So I would make sure, you know, check my feet, made sure all the stuff, my hydration was refilled, made sure I had nutrition, plus grab some more from the aid station. So I was really trying to be diligent on getting to the aid station, but also not being so speedy that I would forget something important, you know? And then when my crew was there, they were great with just kind of helping make that efficiency even more possible. But I mean, the crazy thing was like, for me, an efficient aid station stop was still probably 30 minutes, which, you know, in 100, you'd be like, oh my God, what happened to you? You know? So yeah, I was proud of myself for definitely, I really did feel like throughout the course of the 4 days, like I moved as best I could throughout each of the sections. I was like a little bit ahead of my estimate each time. So for me, that just felt like, okay, I'm not out there just, you know, taking in all the scenery and not moving forward. Like I'm doing a good blend of like moving, checking out this amazing scenery we're in, but also like, you know, trying to race the thing too. So.
And that's, you know, some of the things you're mentioning, you know, Nicole and I had some conversations about like the aid station stops are going to be longer. That's okay. Like hang out at the aid stations, get what you need, because it's so important, because it's going to be a long time before you get to another aid station, and you don't want to let things go that could become a problem that causes a DNF, right? Especially your feet. huge piece is keeping up and taking care of that. And of course your fueling and hydration. But, some of the other things you mentioned about this trail being much more difficult, we coach athletes across the world, but we have a lot of athletes that are centered in the Midwest that do not have mountains to climb. So we're kind of, working on that. And I know you've mentioned some things you did. Some other things I have athletes work on is agility. I don't know if you incorporated agility. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'd say so. Behind just the heavy lifting, I think I did a lot more like plyo work as well, just to again kind of be more adaptable. Because I also knew too, I'm a preacher of comfort. So like I feel like the kettle trail, I could run blindfolded, like probably you both as well. Like you just know it. I'm like, oh, I know there's that route that everyone always trips on. Like whereas this, I was like, I'm not going to know anything, and in the dark, it's going to be even more disorienting. So yeah, I did a lot. I probably had like a heavy lift day, and then a couple of days where I would just kind of add in some more plyo work, like you were saying, like single leg things, just to really kind of strengthen that. Also, I was really honest with myself on weaknesses that I knew I had. Like my left hip sometimes starts to bother me, my right hamstring, knees can be an issue as I've just kind of gone longer and longer into 100. So I was like, what can I do to really like bulletproof those areas, knowing that if it's a problem here, it's going to be a huge problem out there if I don't address it. So, was trying to be as good as I could about like getting into my PT once a month just to see, what can I fix? What can I strengthen? What's not activating, that sort of thing. So yeah, I kind of thought like, if I'm going to put all this, time and investment, and I have, people coming out to support me, like I owe it to them too, to be, on all these things as best I can, so that I'm not going out there and it's like, well, I could have done something for my knees, but I just chose not to. And now they're still sore. I can't go on,
I love that. So I'm a big advocate of, working with a team, a PT, a massage therapist, chiropractor, whatever you may need. And I feel like sometimes people think physical therapist is a last resort, but I've learned it differently. Like just having them on my team is huge, and making sure I'm staying healthy, ready for my runs. And that's recently I also coached somebody to a 1,200 miles. So, it's still like one of these big long distances. And it was the same thing. It's like, we need to make sure to stay on top of, she had an old knee injury, because if it's bothering you now, what's it going to be like day 5 of, your 1,200 miles trek or whatever. So I think that that's a really smart thing to work with athletes on. And I know Reese is probably just dying to get in on this conversation, because this is what he, is passionate about too, is making sure we're healthy and strong to be able to do all of those movements. I'm just going to put a little plug in that we do have an exercise library that is available that our physical therapist, Dr. Lisa Elsie and myself put together. We have single leg work, we have strength work, we have agility. All of these things that we're talking about today is a great reference that you can go to our YouTube channel and you can see that. But, all of those little things are just so important. And as coaches, obviously we know that, and we want to make sure people are successful. So I love that. Not only are we coaching and saying it, we're doing it as coaches. So thanks for sharing that, Katie. And I know Reese is dying to say something about it.
Well, and just to jump in on this conversation, I think one thing that we missed out too is that like in 4 days of heavy exertion, heavy endurance, there's a lot of catabolism going on when you're moving like that, and catabolism just meaning the breakdown of energy resource and sometimes of tissues of the body to further propel your endurance efforts. So in 4 days, like if you're not strong, if you don't have a little bit of like strength mass on you, not just mass overall, but like functional muscle and coordination, like it can really kind of set in like day after day after day, I'd imagine. And that's one thing that you hear a lot from like people who do like long trails, like the IAT, the Appalachian Trail, the PCT, is they go in expecting that, hey, like I'm gonna come out a little bit withered from this. So making sure that you go into it capable and strong, I think, is of the utmost importance, especially for 200 milers, because they're not just 2 100-mile races. A lot of times, like they're 3, 4, 5x whatever the time is. You're at a 100, which is already pretty long, anyways.
Right, and I love that, because I really encourage that, and the athletes that I've had going to these races are going in a little bit heavier because they've gained muscle over their training. For sure, and knowing, especially with the 1,200, knowing, that that's going to happen, we need to make sure that you're going to be strong enough to withstand all of that. So that's cool. And I'm glad you mentioned Amy too, because I want to talk a little bit about, you were a little concerned about changing from the 100 to the 200, how much time commitment, and it is pretty similar. It's a lot of time on feet. And now we're kind of really slowing down that pace and doing maybe a little bit more zone work, one work than we would normally be doing, adding in more power hiking than we're used to. But I think that relative overall volume isn't a whole lot different, or in my experience, it's not a whole lot different. And I think that it shouldn't stop people who want to do these, that are busy people. And I just want to bring this up because Amy is a mom of 5. She has a full-time job, and we were able to still get her to the finish line of hundreds and 200s, working around her schedule. So she may have been doing more 2-a-days than maybe other people would be, so everybody's training plan looks a little bit different, but they're, still able to get to that finish line. So I think we can be creative working with athletes to work around their schedule. Right. And so same way with Nicole, Nicole has a lot more time on the weekends to put in some of her training. So a lot of her time was dedicated on the weekends, so I think that there's ways, if you are listening to this and you want to do a 200 or a 100, ways to do it, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys want to speak to that, but I think that sometimes people get a little nervous about that, thinking about that volume and how are they going to make it happen.
So I think it's amazing when you think about the different principles of endurance as a whole. Like a lot of people will say that, like you can have a really amazing 100-mile time doing mainly marathon-based training, and then sprinkling in that specificity of like, hey, like how are my tissues actually going to be used during race day? So I think it's really interesting that you said it wasn't necessarily any more volume of work that you were doing for 100-mile races, but as that race gets a little bit closer, now you're getting a little bit more specific of like, hey, if I'm going to have this pack on me for 4 days, like I should be running and getting my body used to that. And doing that consistently over time is worth more than thinking, oh, well, for 100, I usually run 50 miles a week. So for a 200, I have to run 100 miles a week, because the total amount of volume of the race doesn't mean you have to, like equally do more training, So.
Yeah. I mean, I think the more race specificity you can get in these and mimicking in your training, some of that run walk piece too is, going to be really helpful, because now we're using different muscles. We're forcing ourselves to move from fast to slow, and those things are mentally a changer. And I know you mentioned, Katie, like I wanted to feel like I was racing. And I think that's one big thing. Sometimes, like I know for me, when I first came to ultra, doing some walking in a race was like shocking to me, because I was like, I don't walk when I race, right? But that's part of the strategy of these bigger events, and being able to mentally be prepared for that. I think it's good to do that in training too. So it's a plan. It's not a forced thing.
Right.
Speaking of mentality too, so what was your total like expected race finish time? Like what were you planning?
I think I actually brought this is my crew manual.
Nice.
I'm glad you did this, Katie, because I want to highlight this as for you. Katie is probably a super organized coach with lots of spreadsheets. Thing is very well organized. So if you get Katie, you get some really great information and guidance. So I'm glad you showed that. I want you to rap about that a little, because that's really cool.
Yeah. So I pretty much took what I had for kettle and just, added things to it. I can't remember, somebody actually even shared with
that elevation again, because that elevation profile is something.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, just as a nerd, I'm loving this.
Yeah, so I mean, somebody I think had shared with me, somebody in the Facebook group for Bigfoot had shared a spreadsheet they had used. So I kind of took that, tweaked it to kind of look how I'm used to looking at it for kettle, and then just kind of really went through, kind of like I was saying, and went through and thought, okay, this segment, I think my pace is going to be this. I think this is my time. It's going to shake out there. And I just let that kind of dictate what I thought my time was going to be. And I was hoping it would come in under the, the required time. And so my rough go at it was like about 98.5 hours. And my coach was like, I think that's conservative, but it's still getting you in under the time. So let's roll with it. So yeah, then I was just kind of like excited to see, okay, I thought the first section was going to take me 4 hours. It took me 3:47. Okay, great. Put that in the back of my head. Next section. Oh, I thought it was going to take me 6 hours. It took me 5.5. Awesome. So like, just like little by little, like, and I told my crew, I'm like, I only want to know if I'm starting to get really tight with cutoffs. I didn't want to have like that cutoff demon, like running right behind me. Also, because the woman who came in dead last, and in 2022, Mackenzie was super helpful with me as well. Like she was just like a wealth of knowledge kind of between Amy and her. You know, they were both just really cool about, I think that's what's so nice about the community too, is like people on the Facebook group, they want to help because they've been there, they've done that. And so she shared with me a lot of things of like, that kind of got her into the position where she was, you know, starting to struggle with cutoffs early. So I knew I didn't want to be that person. And so, yeah, I told my crew, let me know if I'm ever like getting behind, but also like, let me know if I'm still I don't even know how much, but if I'm ahead of my estimate, it would just feel good. Like, okay, I'm banking some time. So yeah, I was super happy to come in, you know, right. Like just a little bit over that 4-hour, time cutoff. I think some spots where I probably, you know, now, like if I were to be like, okay, where could I shave some time? Some of the aid stations, I would end up waiting and just having like, because they have the crazy thing with the 200 shoes, they have like medical staff at each one that will help you out with your feet, or just if you have a question about like how you're feeling about something, they can kind of, you know, work it through with you. But everybody's in the same boat. So if there's like 2 feet people and everyone's coming in, you know, like if you happen to be at a spot where there's like 10 people at the same aid station, you might be waiting a while. So there was one spot, I felt so bad. This gentleman's feet were bad. I never caught his number or his name to see if he finished. I hope he did. But so I was stuck kind of waiting behind him. And I mean, every part of this man's foot was getting taped, like toes, ball of the foot, the heel. So in hindsight, I should have probably had more pre-cut things for myself, just because I think once he told me it wasn't going to be a problem, I just needed to tape my heel. I knew how to tape it. I just didn't have the stuff. It was like a non-crew aid station. In my crew box, I had all my stuff. I should have really had pre-cut tape for myself in all my drop bags. That's what I would probably do differently the next time. But, you know, again, it's like 10 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Like in the, you know, the grand scheme, I just wanted to like finish and feel strong at the end. So like goal accomplished. But yeah, I think little things like that, or, you know, I get to be chatty with my crew, and my crew knew, like, you know, last year's kettle, I was like on a mission. So they like pushed my ass out of there. But, you know, for this one, I was like, I also miss you guys. It's been hours since I've talked to anybody. So let me talk to y'all for a little bit. So, you know, I think the first time doing anything, right, you're kind of a little bit more lenient with yourself on things, but yeah, still came in under what I expected. So I was happy.
Nice. Well, I like the next time. Do you have a next one planned?
Yeah, I'm setting my sights on Cocodona in 25.
Nice.
Yeah. I would do next year. I'm like jonesing to do another one, but my family is like, we're taking a real vacation that doesn't involve you running for 4 days first. So
I have a friend that I run with that's doing Tahoe next year, and so I'm going to do pace. So
fun.
It's for me to kind of dip my toes into it and see.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, all my pacers, and I asked them after the fact, not just during, when they kind of probably had to lie to me and say, this is so much fun. But like, so my best friend, for instance, she has never run more than 50 miles, and she paced me for like 64, 65. Like, it's crazy. Another girl had just, so the girl that I paced at Becca at Kettle, she wasn't sure if she'd be recovered. She ended up jumping in and running like a really hard stretch with me for 18. So, and because my coach had kind of reassured me too, that, you know, a lot of the people that helped her in Tahoe weren't necessarily like ultra runners, you know, they were just people who wanted to help. And as long as the person's excited to help you, and that, you know, it's kind of crazy, like what the pacers can do too, that they weren't maybe thinking they could, you know, like all of my people climbed more than they thought they'd ever climb. And, you know, so it's cool to see everybody kind of from our area go out there and just like experience something totally different than what we have here. Yeah.
I think you're dropping a lot of gold nuggets for us. And I want to go back to that mental piece. I love that tape, you know, having more tape in the drop bags and like anticipating more like medical things and those small things that are nice and light that you can carry on you or in your drop, I think is amazing. And I think the coolest thing that I personally have taken away from this is just like the mentality piece of like, you went out there to race your own expectations, you know? So like, there's plenty of reasons why we go out to do these things, to have a great adventure, to go see some great sights, to, you know, like get to use our bodies and enjoy the outside world. But I think too, just that idea of like, hey, like, what do I think I can do? Like conservatively, what can I do? What do I believe that I can do no matter what? And then trying to just tell yourself like, hey, I want to race that. I want to race my own expectations, I think is a beautiful why, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of us, like, you know, maybe are scared too, coming from here and doing something not at our backyards. I mean, I was definitely like, don't get me wrong, the night before the race, I was like, oh my God, this is happening tomorrow. I was definitely feeling the nerves, but I trusted my training. I mean, and like the mental component was such a huge thing for me. I mean, the second I got into this race, this has been my screens. It doesn't really show really well, but this is an image from the website. I mean, so every time I opened my phone, every morning, every time, it was like, this is your goal, and I wanted it so bad that literally I told my crew like the night before, through some tears, I was like, medics will take me off this course. Like, do not let me tell you anything else. Like I'm not stopping until I get to that finish. And even if it's after the cutoff and they let me keep going, like I will finish this thing, So I think like to any of our athletes too, if you want it that bad and you're mentally that excited about it and your heart's in it, your head's in it, like you're going to figure out the way to make it happen, no matter where you live and train.
For sure. And you said some things that I just love. I mean, for one, keeping that visual, I think, is super huge, and keeping our goal in sight, right? So you're seeing it, we're reminding ourselves every day that this is our goal. And a little while back in our conversation, you were talking about picking your race and looking at hundreds, and you didn't have any that was really calling you, but then you found this race that's calling you. And I love that, because I often have athletes like kind of scrambling for 100. And I'm like, you got to pick one that you really want to do, because you're going to be out there a long time. And that's even more so, right, with the 200. So I love that, you kind of shared that bit of wisdom, because I think that's super important, is want to pick something that you really want to do. These are big events, and you want to, be in that moment. I do wonder though, we haven't talked about this. Did you do anything, or how did your body respond for the elevation? Did you do anything to prepare yourself, or did you go early or the day before? Or how did that work for you? Did you notice any problems with that?
Yeah, luckily, I'm sorry if you hear, I have an automatic feeder for my cat. So if you hear any random, that's them. Yeah, so I luckily know I'm pretty good under like 7,000, 8,000. I don't really notice the elevation as much. That was another reason that Bigfoot kind of seemed, even though like when you listen to stuff, they're like, no one does Bigfoot as their first. But I don't know, for me, like the scenery was my draw. I was like, if I'm surrounded by this gorgeousness, I'm gonna make this happen. And also the highest you get is 5,800 feet. So it's not, it's still high compared to here, but it's not like Leadville 10,000, or like a race like Hard Rock where you're like over 11 for half, almost all of it. So that was a nice draw for me too. I think the only thing I wasn't prepared for, and I don't know how I would prepare, is just, I don't know if Nicole mentioned this too, but just like some of the ridge lines were so narrow that, and it's like there's death and there's a mountain and there's a little trail. I don't know if
the dark.
Yeah. So I don't know if I need to start walking on a balance beam, or something, but that was the only thing that kind of like caught me off guard. But yeah, thankfully, the elevation, I was okay. And I mean, I think a lot of us too kind of hope that, the humidity air factor that we have here with just like, how hot and sticky it gets kind of is a little bit similar to like when you have a little bit less oxygen. But I honestly felt like breathing wise, everything was okay, only getting up to 6,000.
Yeah, nice. So both of my athletes at one point did go to the mountains and do a little bit of training, and that gave them a boost of confidence. Did you do that? I mean, it's not something you necessarily have to do, but they did it, to boost their confidence and get some training in.
Yeah. Oh my God, I wanted to. The friend that I had moved from here to Denver, I had planned on like, I'm going to get a big weekend out with you. And it just didn't happen between, life and the expenses. Like that's the only thing, like the first time you're doing this too, like you have to, it's kind of like the first time you're doing 100, you might not have all the gear. So then you start to like rack up the gear. And so I sadly couldn't go out and travel anywhere, but I did do a race on in Kentucky, which again, just like a smidge better elevation and a little bit more technical than we have here. So that kind of helped too. And I purposely had, I had friends out there. My pacer was out there. She was running her own 50K. And then people who have on my crew were there, but I was like, don't come find me. I'm just going to run this 50 miles all by myself. Cause there was a couple spots where they could have been. And I was like, I'd rather just not see anybody for the whole day and have to rely on my drop bags and myself just to kind of practice that, like, being out for 10, 12 hours and not seeing anything and just having to, kind of do it yourself. So that was probably my biggest practice.
So, I mean, I think this has been an amazing show. I mean, lots of great information, people doing 200s. I think this is super valuable. So thanks for sharing that. I do kind of want to end with a little bit of a comment from Amy, my previous athlete that did Bigfoot, because this has really stuck with me. And she may have told you this. She said, this will be the worst or the best, worst thing they will ever do. It was absolutely life-changing for me. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Mine is, it was brutal and beautiful.
So I love that. Anything to end it, Reese?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Coach Katie. I want to be respectful of your time. I mean, we can sit here and ask you a million questions about the experience. And I guess, this is a good prompt. Listeners, if you want to know more, like hit Coach Katie up on the website. We'll have her linked up and everything. Coach Katie, do you want to rattle off any of your social handles or where people can grab you best?
Yeah, my Instagram is Coach Katie 60647. Like about a year ago, my Facebook got hacked, so I'm not as much on there as I was. But yeah, you can definitely find me on the Ornery Mule page. But yeah, on the Coach Katie 60647 is on my running. Some sprinkling of the kid stuff and my cats.
Great. Yeah, and if you go to our webpage, there's a form that you can fill out that goes directly to me, and I can get you hooked up with Coach Katie or Coach Reese or any of our coaches. So thanks for listening, and it was really a great show. I'm excited to be able to spend that time with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. All right, we'll take care.